All right, let's be honest. We're about to dive into one of those chapters in ancient literature that most people just skip. A genealogy from the book of Genesis. At first glance, it's just a long, kind of boring list of names and numbers. But what if it's not just a list? What if it's actually a masterfully crafted story, coated with this incredible message about life, death, and even hope? Let's dig in and find out.
So that's the big question, right? Is this just a dusty old family tree? Or is there something profound about the human condition tucked away in its super rigid structure? We're going to treat this thing like a narrative puzzle, looking for all the patterns and, more importantly, the pieces that just don't seem to fit. So first things first, let's just get our bearings. We're in chapter 5 of Genesis, and it's presenting itself as humanity's very first family tree. Now, you got to remember, in the ancient world, a genealogy was way more than just ancestry. It was about your identity, your legitimacy. It was the flow of history itself. The whole thing kicks off with this really formal statement. It calls itself a written account. That's a huge signal right there. This isn't just some casual collection of names someone jotted down. No, this is meant to be a foundational document, meticulously designed to trace one single unbroken line all the way from the first man, Adam. And that line, it has a very clear destination. This whole list serves a super important purpose in the story. It's a 10-generation bridge, connecting Adam, right at the dawn of humanity, to Noah, the guy who's going to be at the very center of its survival. So this isn't random at all. It's a journey with a massive endpoint. Okay, so as you read through this list, something becomes incredibly obvious. I mean, it hits you like a ton of bricks. This is not a collection of unique, interesting biographies. Nope. It is a rigid, repetitive pattern. It's like a formula for life and death that gets stamped onto almost everyone. For almost every single person on this list, their entire life story gets boiled down to this exact 4-part formula. It creates this very predictable rhythm. A man lives, he has a son, he lives a bit longer, and then he dies. This methodical structure sets a really clear and honestly pretty somber baseline for what life is like in this early chapter of humanity. So let's just take a look at Adam's son, Seth. He's a perfect example of this. The text tells us he was 105 when his son Enosh was born. Then he lived another 807 years. You add it all up, and boom, you get a total lifespan of 912 years. This precise, almost mathematical breakdown just gets used again and again and again. And this phrase, this becomes the final heavy beat of that rhythm. Adam lived 930 years, and then he died. Seth lived 912 years, and then he died. It's this relentless drumbeat of mortality, just hammering home the point that no matter how ridiculously long these guys lived, their story always ends the same way. Until, all of a sudden, it doesn't. And this, my friends, is the shocking twist in the story. 7 generations in, that predictable pattern just shatters. We meet a man named Enoch, and his story completely breaks the formula. The contrast here is just, wow, it's so stark. On one side, you have that standard formula we've seen over and over again. But for Enoch, the last 2 steps are totally different. Instead of just living more, the text says he walked in close fellowship with God. And then the final line, this is the game changer, it isn't, and then he died, it's, God took him. The text is so simple, but also deeply mysterious. He just disappeared. This is a massive interruption in the ongoing story of universal death. For the very first time, the text introduces another possibility, a whole different destiny that's not tied to how long you live, but to the quality of your life. This idea of walking with God. And what's so fascinating is that Enoch only lived 365 years. That is a strikingly short life compared to his relatives, like his own son Methuselah, who lived to be 969. The author is making a pretty radical point here. The most remarkable life in this entire family tree wasn't the longest one. It was the one that was lived differently. Okay, so after the crazy mystery of Enoch, the genealogy kind of goes back to its familiar rhythm for a little bit, but it's building to one final, huge twist, and it's all centered on the 10th and final man in the line, a guy named Noah. You know, in the world of the Bible, names are rarely ever just labels. They almost always carry some kind of prophetic meaning about a person's destiny, and the name Noah is a perfect example. It sounds just like the Hebrew word for relief or comfort. And his father, Lamech, makes this connection totally explicit. He doesn't just give his son the name, he attaches this powerful prophetic hope to it.
In a world that he describes as full of painful labor on cursed ground, Lamech looks at his new son and sees the possibility of a better future, a future of relief. This one single line sets the stage for everything that's about to happen next.
So, after digging through this whole ancient list of names and numbers, what's the big picture here? Why does this genealogy, which seems like just a historical record, still matter today? Let's bring it all together.
What looks like a dry list is actually this rich three-act story, you see? First, it sets the baseline for the human condition. You're born, you have a family, and sorry to say, you die. Then, second, it throws in this stunning exception with Enoch, which suggests that, hey, maybe mortality isn't the only possible ending. And finally, it wraps up with a prophecy of hope in Noah, hinting that relief from all the world's struggles is on the way. So in the end, this ancient list lays out this fundamental pattern for humanity, but what it really celebrates are the exceptions. And it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the repeating patterns, those and then they died rhythms, that we just take for granted in the stories we tell today? And maybe more importantly, who are the Enochs, the anomalies, that are showing us all that a different way is actually possible?